Hello, my name is Margot McKnight. I'm from the Florida Aquarium, and you are watching Tampa Bay Community Network.
Hi, welcome to Culture Vultures. I'm Linda Saul-Sena, and I have a great guest today. Margot McKnight is in charge of animals, both at the aquarium and in the wild. So I'm so happy you could join me.
I'm thrilled to be here.
I want to hear, the official phrase I think was animal husbandry, but this doesn't mean that you're matchmaking amongst the animals.
Well, interesting, because we do some of that, because both in the wild and in managed care, we really care about animals reproducing, because that means you're healthy and you have all the nutrition you need. So there is part of that, but there's a lot more than that.
Well, let's start with the wilds, because I really wasn't aware that the Florida Aquarium, which is located in downtown Tampa, had a sort of off-home base component.
No, well, good. Thanks for asking me that, because that's really where my passion lies. The Florida Aquarium's vision is to protect and restore the blue planet, which is a huge job.
That's wonderful.
So the important part of an aquarium that the public can come into is that we show you what the underwater world looks like. So very few people on the planet have the luxury of actually scuba diving or even snorkeling. And if you don't know what's under there, it's hard to get passionate about it, and then it's hard to care about it, and then it's hard to do the right thing. So the aquarium has a very important purpose to get the people coming through falling in love with the ocean. I mean, that's kind of our job, which is a fun job. But the wild part, which is what you asked me about, is hard to see for the people that even live in the whole Tampa Bay community, because we do a lot of our work in the Keys, Gulf of Mexico, a little farther out, and then we started in 2014 working in Cuba.
So, that is so cool.
Yeah, so it's really important, if you think of protect and restore the blue planet, to connect what we have in these beautiful habitats that people can see to really what's happening in the wild, and make sure we do our very best on both sides of that equation.
So what do you do in the Keys?
So in the Keys, we work with a partner called the Coral Restoration Foundation. That's one of our main partners. But we also work with the federal government, NOAA, and Florida Wildlife Conservation Commission, because the species we work on is protected. It's a very threatened coral. And when you think of coral, I think most people think of this particular species, it's staghorn coral. And they have big, beautiful branches. It kind of looks like a stag's horn.
Right.
And it's real important because it looks like a rock, but it's an animal. And it functions not only as an animal, but as a habitat for other creatures.
I have to say, I didn't really get that. And I've seen these wonderful crocheted, it's like a crocheted riff on coral. And I thought, oh, what a beautiful art manifestation of rock, but it's really an
a living animal.
What does it eat?
Well, it's interesting because it's a living animal that lays down a lot of calcium carbonate, which makes it look like a rock, and then it pulls in from the water column an algae.
Okay.
And each species of coral has a particular algae it brings in. And the algae gives the coral its color. So when you say, what does a coral eat? It does two things. It photosynthesizes like a plant, which is why it's in shallow, beautiful, clear waters like the Keys. The coral we work on, like 80% of its nutrients comes from photosynthesis. The rest, these little polyps kind of stick out of the hard coral and collect things from the water column.
So
they
interesting.
eat stuff from the water and they photosynthesize.
I just think that's so curious, because it's almost like two kinds of species, like an animal and a plant.
Yeah, it's a total relationship that they need each other. So the coral protects the plant, and the coral absolutely gets a lot of amino acids from the photosynthetic process of the
And the reason that coral is threatened is from the acidity of the water?
There's a lot of things threatening our coral, and that's where Cuba comes into really important place. So when you hear coral bleaching, what's happening is the warm water is stressing the coral. And one of the reactions is to get rid of those little algae, the photosynthetic organisms. So then the coral looks pale. And it's not dead. It's lost a big part of its way of getting food.
Okay.
So if it can recover, it'll pull that back in, it will recover, and in fact, it will reproduce again. But if it's too long or too often, then sometimes the coral, you do lose it. And that's what's happening globally as our temperatures are increasing on the planet. This is happening more and more. But that's only one piece of the equation. So Cuba is not that far from our field site in the Keys. And the water temperatures are similar. The amount of acidification, which is another problem with this, lots of CO2 in the atmosphere, is actually absorbed by the water, changes the pH. Those are big things, and some people say, you know what, you're never going to be able to save the coral because of these giant changes on our planet. But if you look at the coral in Cuba, it looks way, way, way better than our coral. And their field site's maybe 200 miles from ours.
Well, so why?
There you go. So that's the question. So it's hard to answer when you don't have a nice model, right? To say, well, these things are happening and this is maybe a combination of things. Probably pollution, things running off our shores into the water. We didn't know all this when we were developing South Florida. We have a lot more boats in the water. We have a lot more traffic on the reef. There's a lot of pressures. But the neat thing about looking 200 miles away and saying, we could have that again if we're willing to set aside areas to protect it. And
that
or
would be great.
the quality of the water needs to get healthier, which means healthier fish, healthier humans. People are going to be happier about that. So Cuba's an example for what we need to shoot for, and look at what they're doing differently on their island compared to what we're doing differently in the Keys.
And you're getting a lot, you're able to do this legally, to have a scientific relationship with Cuba?
The interesting thing
Wonderful.
about, and it's the way it should be really, science should kind of supersede everything, because we're trying to get answers that help humans here, and we're connected by the ocean.
Of course.
There is no barrier. So what we can learn there can help us living here. And certainly we hope as Cuba changes and things open up, that they can learn from things that we've done and maybe protect what they have and make sure it's healthy for long periods of time. Because the other piece of the puzzle is, as the currents come through Cuba, it washes right up through our Keys. So the health of their ocean...
Wow. We are downstream.
We are downstream. So sea turtles, lobsters, everything kind of moves back and forth. So we have a big interest in making sure they have healthy oceans too. But again, looking at them as the model for us and saying we can be like that. And the other huge example is Tampa Bay. So look at what we've done with Tampa Bay since the 80s.
It's impressive.
Fantastic. And that was just the communities living along the bay saying, nope, we're going to do this. We're going to protect that water. We're going to keep things from running in it. And now we've got fish, sea turtles. We're doing health assessments on sea turtles in Tampa Bay.
The grasses have come back a huge percentage.
Way more than they ever expected. So that's like, gives me goosebumps. We can totally have what we want and what we need as a community from an economic standpoint, from a recreational standpoint. We can have these beautiful, healthy waters. We can protect and restore the blue planet.
So tell me more about the coral spawning.
So it's going to sound real romantic. So every August, sometimes September, but 3 days after the full moon late summer. Doesn't that sound romantic to start off?
And how does isn't that interesting that the coral knows when the full moon is?
Yes. So it's probably the warmest time of the year for the ocean. And this only happens once a year for this coral, for this particular species. And that's not uncommon for these kind of corals. So what happens is they release, each coral colony is genetically an animal. So if you take a little piece off, like a cactus, and plant it, it will grow. But then it's genetically the same.
Got it.
So what we're trying to do is we collect, the sperm and eggs come off one coral colony, so it's genetically the same. And what normally would happen is they would come up into the water column and kind of flow into a coral over there that's genetically different. But what's happened is so much of the coral has been lost because of boat traffic and pollution and all of those problems, that they're patchy. So we might have a coral here and a coral way over there. So when they release the sperm and eggs, they just float out into the ocean. So right now, NOAA even says There's no sexual reproduction going on in the Keys of this species. And the problem with that is sexual reproduction gives you genetic diversity. And you need genetic diversity to deal with all of the changes in the environment.
Absolutely.
So we go down and literally we've learned all of these steps. So we've done a bunch of scientific trials to get the best numbers out of this. So what we do is we capture the sperm and eggs that float. It looks like snow in reverse. This coral starts snowing around 10:30, 3 days after the full moon. We send divers down there. They put nets and collect in a jar this coral. We know what kind of genetic genotyping it is, and then we match make. We do it all over this one area.
That is fantastic.
So we've learned how to then separate the sperm and eggs and to match make in not a very romantic beaker, and then we stir it, and within hours you literally get embryos, and then you get free swimming larvae. So that stony coral for a bit of its life is this tiny little free swimming larva, and then it settles, and then it grows from there.
That is absolutely fascinating. I had no idea that coral had life in that way.
Right. No, for a while it can swim and move around. So we're just figuring all that out. And the idea is to do that. I mean, we collected a million and a half last spring of just a few animals. We released most of them back into the water column. You can't count to see whether it actually was successful out there, but we can in the lab. So the point is to really ratchet that production up and be able to reintroduce genetically diverse corals in the future.
I'm amazed, absolutely amazed that that level of sophistication exists.
We're just figuring out, and it's not us by ourselves. We bring in partners. Again, we work with the state and federal agencies and the Coral Restoration Foundation and other coral experts. We bring them all down there, and we're figuring this out because it can't be just the Florida Aquarium. It's a big effort. Nature Conservancy, a lot of different groups are working together to fix this, and we can't have enough support and effort going to this because corals are only 2% of the ocean bottom globally,
yes.
Yet they provide 25% of all of the life in the ocean. So you
Are you serious?
I'm serious. You can draw back in some life cycle of the species that live in the ocean, you can draw back to coral reefs. So they're one of the most important ecosystems out there.
And you are teaching kids about this at the aquarium.
Yes.
In a it's almost a museum setting, in an aquarium setting.
Exactly. A safe way that they can see and experience and hopefully get excited enough and inspired enough to become a researcher or scientist or fundraiser or educator. We want them to fall in love with what we're doing so that they grow up and want to do something about it.
Well, and in the interim, they can do things like keep plastic bags out of the water.
Absolutely.
And I mean,
use coral safe sunscreen. There's a lot of scientists know now that a lot of the sunscreens we use are deadly to coral.
You're kidding. I had no idea.
Yeah, there's chemicals in some of the sunscreen, a lot of the sunscreen that corals can't handle, so probably other species can't either, and I'm not sure I'd want it on my skin.
So I don't think that's gotten a lot of publicity.
No.
You know, it seems like you could go to the manufacturers of these sunscreens and say, if you don't take this out soon, we're going to go public with this, and who wants to have coral-killing sunscreen?
That's another way to look
really?
at it. Yes.
So, okay, so that's Cuba and the Keys.
Yes.
And then do you do other wild?
Yeah, the other two projects we're doing, one is sea turtles. So we've been rescuing and getting back out sea turtles since Florida Aquarium opened. So we are well oiled. We have a great team. In fact, this year we got some little tiny ones. What happens is if they hatch and start their journey and a big storm comes up, which we had some late storms this year, they're called washbacks, I think. They get pushed all the way back to the shore. And it takes a lot of effort as a tiny little turtle to get out where they need to. So they get rescued, and then they find places like the Florida Aquarium to keep them, grow them up a bit before they can take them back out to a weed line. So there's, in the ocean, in the Gulf of Mexico, there's seaweeds that float, and that's where these little turtles aim for. They get out to this weed line where they have food and shelter. So when they get a little bigger and healthier, we'll actually give them to the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. They'll put them on a boat and they'll bring them all the way out to the weed line and let them go. So they have a kind of a head start. So they got washed back, and now we get to put them way back out into the ocean. And they're all, I think there's 7 species of sea turtles. They're all endangered. One is threatened these animals are they're important bellwethers. They live a long time, and they're really good indicators of the health of our oceans. So they're really important to us. In fact, we're starting to do health assessments on sea turtles in Tampa Bay because they're back in Tampa Bay, and maybe they were never gone, but the bay's in such good shape you can actually see them now.
Well, I remember I grew up around here, and there was a sign on the beach at Davis Island you couldn't swim because the water was, I forget what was wrong. It was not a safe thing, not a healthy thing.
Right.
And now, no problem.
Right. So look at what we can do. So sometimes things get a little like, the hurdles seem insurmountable, but they're not. We can figure it out. We just need to commit ourselves to. And so sea turtles are another important piece because they're indicators. They're long-lived. They collect a lot of toxins if they're in bad environments, or they won't be in that environment. So
do they intuit that and swim somewhere else?
we don't know a lot of the answers to those questions, but we do know if we, over time, like you go to the doctor,
right,
hopefully regularly, and you get a health checkup, so that doctor can see over time what's happening.
Yes.
That's what we're hoping to do with turtles long time in the bay, and that way we can see the health of the turtle. So hopefully we'll be picking up the same turtle over time, but even if we don't get the exact same one, we'll be able to measure certain levels in those animals, which is an indicator for you and me living near the bay, how healthy that bay is.
That is absolutely fascinating. I didn't really understand how broad the education mission of the aquarium is. It seems like it's really central to what you all do.
It is, because when people come in and we get them excited and loving the ocean, which is really our job, we also need to be able to say, and we're doing something about it, and you can participate or help us. So that's the other piece of the puzzle. And thank you for having me here, because as you say, not as many people as we want to know really understand what we're doing outside the Florida Aquarium. So opportunities like this are really important because it may give people ideas, or that would help us over time take care of sea turtles and coral
And
sharks.
yes, and all of you. So now when people come to the aquarium, you're in charge, you're the grown-up in charge of the animals there too, yes?
That's my responsibility. Here's the great news though. I have an amazing team of people that know way, way more than I do about actually taking care of the animals there. So my staff is amazing. They know when a fish is not feeling right.
How?
They love these animals. They spend lots of time making sure. We have a big grouper. We don't know if it's a male or female. Cletus is the animal's name. So when they get bigger, they change sex. Groupers are one of those fish that change sex over their lifetime. Oh yeah, there's lots of really cool things under the water that we don't know about. But this animal, Cletus, wasn't that happy with divers, and we have to go in there to clean the tank and clean the glass so people can see. And then we started working on a wellness program for all our animals, and we were like, what can we do with this grouper to make its life even better? So they started playing with bubbles and sand.
That's so nice.
And now this grouper loves the divers. It comes right up, it'll open its mouth, and we put bubbles under its gills and in its mouth. And now
does it tickle the fish?
It loves it. It'll follow the divers around. Now we can like measure the grouper and touch the grouper, instead of it being like, we're just something in its environment that it's,
skittish about. That's so much fun.
Yeah.
I bet the bubbles tickle, and that's what Cletus is
Yeah,
after.
we think, because a lot of times grouper on reefs will go to cleaner stations and all these fish kind of clean little parasites off. We think that's kind of mimiking that. And even though there are little fish in there, it just likes the spa treatment much better.
Hey, I'm all about that. I'll tell you what my favorite fish at the aquarium is.
Oh, what?
The dragon. I think they're dragonfish. They look kind of like seahorses.
Yeah, leafy
but they've
sea
got
dragons.
Yeah, leafy. Yes, they have these fluttery.
They're beautiful.
They're so delicate looking.
Yeah. No, they're gorgeous. So they're from Australia. And
how do you get them here?
Well, what's interesting is most of the animals that we have at the aquarium, we either work hard on trying to breed them in a managed care situation, so we don't take them from the ocean, but there's still a lot that we still take from the ocean to have to engage people.
How do you get them here?
So the leafy sea dragons, there's one person in Australia that has a permit, because it's very, very, very carefully monitored, because you don't want to take too much out of the ocean, whether you're eating the animal like we do, or keeping them and and breeding them. So there's one person in Australia that's allowed to carefully collect these, and they monitor the population so there's not too many, and it's shipped all the way over here in shipping containers with air
water
and temperature control. Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing.
That is so do you have a place behind, I'm only familiar with the public spaces at the aquarium. Do you have a place sort of behind the scenes where you're trying to breed different fish?
We do, and
animals?
the big project that is sharks, we have a whole lease site in Apollo Beach that's being built right now.
Really?
We have a coral ark. We have a sea turtle research hospital going up right now, and we're going to have a shark breeding facility. The shark species we have, sand tigers, are very vulnerable, and they've been fished out in a lot of places on the planet. So we're working with a lot of other aquariums to figure out what their reproductive cycles are and how would we breed them? How would we captively manage those animals so that we know we have them to get people interested in them in aquariums, because they're this beautiful shark that are very easy to swim around. We bring people diving with our sharks all the time.
I've seen that, and I think that's wild. And people can do that. I mean, you sort of pay extra and you can...
Right.
That's a fabulous thing.
And it's to get people to understand how important sharks are. So we've paired that...
And to probably not be wildly fearful.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's more dangerous to drive to the beach in your car than it is to swim in the water in the beach.
That's interesting.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So we've paired our shark project on land with a wild... We want to make sure the populations in the wild are protected, and there's not a lot of information known about these sharks. So we're working with a couple other aquariums to actually tag the sharks in the wild and monitor where they are. So you want to know where the pregnant females are, where the males are, where they pup. So you make sure those parts of the coast are protected from fishing.
Who has the ability to put that protection in place?
You know, it depends upon how far out you are and what state you're in, but this species is regulated by the fisheries, which is a federal regulation.
Good.
NOAA looks at the species and says it's really been reduced, so you're not allowed to fish for them, but sometimes they get caught up as bycatch. So you want to reduce that as much as possible. You want those populations to come back.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I always feel like some states are more conscientious than others in terms of environmental regulation. So I'm glad to hear that hopefully the federal protections are in place. And if not, I guess state protections would kick in.
Yeah, they really, we're paying attention to all of them, and we work with both the federal and state agencies. And, you know, there's great people that work in both federal and state, and they work really closely with the aquariums.
Good.
Yeah, so we're a great outreach piece for the sea. You know, people come to us that never are going to poke their head underneath. They may swim in it. So for them to understand the importance and the beauty and how connected they are to it just helps all of the state and federal agencies do their right thing and be supported by the public.
Right. Well, let me ask you something. Do you eat fish? It's kind of a personal question.
No, I do, but I'm very careful at the species I eat because... And it's always a personal thing. In fact, I heard Sylvia Earle, who's one of my heroines, I heard her not that long ago, and she said the safest seafood to eat is vegetables. Something along those lines. I'm like, darn, I really should be a vegetarian. But I do. I love the fish at the aquarium, and they have personalities, and I'm like, oof. So yes, I do, but I'm very conscientious and try my hardest to only eat sustainable seafood. So it's kind of a limited palate, but if we let these populations bound back, we'll be able to eat any species again.
Well, it's so crazy when you read early tales of people coming to North America and how there were so many fish. You sort of put a bucket out and it was filled with fish. I mean, they were just so abundant.
Right.
And we're getting smart. I mean, I really believe we're getting smart.
Yes.
The question is, are we getting smart enough quickly enough?
Fast enough. No, that is the question. That is the question. But the more people know, it's really a numbers game on the good side too. If a lot of people know what to do, and you do a lot of voting with your wallet, right? What you buy and where you spend your time has probably bigger influence than a lot of other things you can do. So just falling in love with it, then starting to learn about it, and then living according to that, inspiration can go a long way to make change happen fast. I mean, look at how some things are happening very quickly.
And I have to say, young people really get this stuff.
They do.
Which is a pleasure to see.
Absolutely. They ask really good questions, and there's no hiding anymore under rocks, right? Everything is exposed, whether the information is totally accurate or not is not always clear, but it is an opportunity to talk to people, and it's also a way of making information very transparent and available.
So we have just a few minutes left. Is there anything that I haven't asked that would be fun? And I do have to say, I love the penguins.
Oh, I do too. Well, one of the things, I guess, in the last few years, so if you haven't been to the aquarium in the last few years, we have been doing a lot of is people love to talk to the biologists that take care of the animals.
Absolutely.
And just like they're working with Cletus, the Goliath grouper, they're working with all of the other animals to make their life the happiest, most stimulated, the most physically fit possible. So we're doing a lot more animal interactions with our staff, and the guests get to see that. So coming in to see, we have the smartest alligators on the planet. We get alligator yoga going. We get them to bend here and there, and they follow a target. My biologists now can go in with them. The vet can draw blood and hold their tail, and because we spend a lot of time with our animals, and they're very calm. They know if they're in the right place. They either get a massage or some warm water or food. The alligators are like very well taken care of.
This is fascinating.
Every animal responds like a human or a dog does to positive reinforcement and things you love, right? Whether it's a comfortable chair or food or something fun to do. So we've been working really hard on that. And it shows when the visitors come in, because you see animals much more active and interacting with the people that take care of them and they're attached to, and they truly do get attached.
That's amazing. And you share this information, I would assume, with other aquariums, and they
absolutely.
We
learn from each other. We're always sharing information. We have a nurse shark that now comes up. You can get the animal to swim right in your lap. The vet can do a vet exam, and then you just let it go. You know, it lives in a 500,000 gallon environment, a habitat. So to be able to call that animal up, and it comes because it's a fun thing for it.
Margot,
Yeah.
you are amazing. This is so interesting. I feel like Tampa has its own fish planet, and who knew?
We'll come back.
I will.
I'll give you a tour. I'll give you a personal tour.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank you for
today.
having me. This is hugely important to get the word out.
It's great fun. And thank you all for watching Culture Vultures. Take care.